Okay, this is the Rhino version, so I'm going to explain how to solve all of these. This is for the Rhino version. Okay, so we're solving our quadratic equation here, and you're looking for numbers that p can equal to make this statement true. Well, it'll be easier if you have all of the numbers and all the terms on the same side. So we're going to move this negative 16p over here, but be careful how when you bring it over. This is the negative 16p, so you're going to add 16p, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in descending order by exponents. So I'm going to put the 16p here versus at the end. Just saves me one step of moving it around. Now, before I factor, so what I'm doing is I'm looking for two binomials multiplied together to get this trinomial. Well, in order to make it a little easier, I like to factor out any greatest common factor that I can. We have a 2p squared plus 16p plus 24. Well, is there a greatest common factor in all three of these? And there is, and that's 2. Because each of these numbers are divisible by 2. You cannot take a p out because there's no p here. So I'm going to factor out a 2. So I'm left with p squared plus 8p plus 12 equals 0. Now what I'm doing is I'm looking for two binomials that multiply to get this p squared plus 8p plus 12. Since this a term is 1, I can go straight into factoring, meaning this p squared is going to be p and p, but I'm now looking for numbers that multiply to get 12 but add together to get 8. So you got to think of your factors of 12. So think of your factors of 12, and that's like 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4, and those are all the factors of 12. And what I'm doing is I'm looking for numbers that multiply to get a positive 12 but add together to get 8. Well, I'm looking here, if those are both positive, that would be 13. Here's 8, that would be 7. So 2 and 6 are my two numbers that I can multiply to get 12, but add together to get 8. Notice this is a positive. So when I multiply, the only way you can get a positive number when you multiply is either they're both negative or they're both positive. So I know these both have to be the same sign. But then I look here, this positive 8. In order to add together to get 8, both of these have to be positive. So that has to be a positive 2 and a positive 6. So here's how we're completely factored. It's completely factored down. I cannot factor it anymore. Now I can solve what p can equal to make this 0. Well, this means 2 times some number equals 0. Now, in order to multiply to get 0, one of these have to be 0 at a time. That means this term can be 0 or this term can be 0. So I'm going to say p plus 2 equals 0 or p plus 6 equals 0. I could do 2 equals 0, but that's not true. So there's no variable out here, so that's not possible. But what does p have to be in order to make this 0? You add 2 to get 0. Well, p has to be a negative 2. P plus 6 equals 0. P has to be a negative 6. So you have two solutions here, two roots to this equation. And you can even plug it back in and check it. Negative 2 squared is 4. 2 times 4 is 8 plus 24. Negative 16 times a negative 2, well, 8 plus 24 is 32. And negative 16 times a negative 2 is 32. And you can test it with negative 6 if you like. But put these back into your equation and see if those work and equal each other. Now this one. So again, that doesn't equal 0. So I'm going to move this. I'm going to do negative 12r squared plus 5r plus 3 equals 0. Okay, now this one then, I want to look to see if there are any greatest common factors that I can pull out. And there's not. That's a negative 12, a 5, and a 3. So there's nothing I can pull out. So this is where you're going to have to do a little bit more work than this one. Our a term is not 1. Notice our a term's negative. So I'm going to actually make this a little easier, and I'm going to factor out a negative 1 because I like my a term to be positive if possible. So I'm going to factor out a negative 1 from every term. That means it changes the sign of everything. Now again, this is the a term is 12. Over here we had the a term is 1, so we can go straight into factoring. This is going to take a little bit more work. So this is where you're going to take your AC, you're going to multiply your a term times your c term, which is a negative 36, and then your b term is a negative 5. So what you're looking for are factors of 36, multiply to get 36, but add together to get negative 5. So you have like 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, and right there, 4 and 9 are 5 apart. So your numbers are going to be 4 and 9. Here's where you have to replace. This is where some of you are forgetting how to do this. what I'm doing here, my answers are not 4 and 9 yet. I'm going to do 12r squared. Now, one of these have to be negative in order to get a negative 36, but add together a negative 5, so the 9 has to be negative. So that's going to mean a positive 4r minus 9r minus 3 equals 0. And this is going to be parentheses right now too. But these two terms replace this term. And remember, so that's what we're doing. Now we can group these two together. So now I'm going to group 12r squared plus 4r and a negative 9r minus 3. So I'm going to group the first two, and I'm going to group the last two. Okay, so now I can pull out the GCF here. So this negative 1 is still out here. I'm going to pull out a 4r. Then you have a 12r squared, which is going to be 3r plus 1. That's where some of you are forgetting. 4r divided by 4r, 3r plus, and that's positive 1. Here, that's a negative and a negative. I want it to be 3r plus 1. So if I factor out a negative 3, then I get a 3r plus 1. So these two are the same, and that's what we want. So now we're going to group up the 4r minus 3. So that negative 1 is still out here. 4r minus 3. 3r plus 1 equals 0. Now, I can FOIL this, FOIL or do your table to see if it comes back to this, where is it? Up here. If you FOIL this and see if it comes back to this and you're negative 1, then if you distribute the negative 1, you should get back to this one. Now, we're still not done yet. We need to solve for r to make this 0. So this is where you have 4r minus 3 equals 0, or 3r plus 1 equals 0. So add 3, 4r equals 3, r equals 3/4, or that's a negative 1/3. 3r equals a negative. This is just solving a two-step equation, you guys. You guys are good at that. So r equals a negative 1/3. Sorry, that's a whole lot of room. Okay, so that one does take a little bit more work because our a term was not 1. All right, now this one, 9m squared minus 1 equals 0. Now look closely at these two. First of all, it's a binomial, not a trinomial, not 3 terms. But we have 2 terms, and it's subtraction. When it's difference of perfect squares. Now look at the 9m squared, that's a perfect square, and a 1 is a perfect square. So that means we can go straight into writing our 2 binomials. So 9m squared is going to be 3m and 3m. 1 is going to be 1 and 1. And to be a negative here, that means it has to be a negative or a positive, because we want to cancel out the middle term. It's going to look exactly the same except for the signs are going to be different. Now solve. 3m minus 1 equals 0, or 3m plus 1 equals 0. So you're going to get a positive 1, 3m equals 1. So your m is going to equal a positive 1/3, or your m is going to equal a negative 1/3. Because if you subtract 1 here, 3m equals a negative 1. And that's how we're getting 3m equals a negative 1/3. You might even see it like this, positive negative 1/3, which is fine. But that's a difference of perfect squares, okay? And so when there's only 2 and there's subtraction of perfect squares, guarantee it's probably going to be like that. Okay, now this one. So your word problem. We're talking about what are the dimensions of the box. The card has a volume. So you got to remember your volume is your length times width times height. So our volume is 60. Now here are all 3 of our terms. So, and it's all multiplication, so it doesn't matter really which one you have in first. But if you have your x plus 6 times x minus 2 times x minus 1. The thing is here, you have 3 terms that you're multiplying. You can't multiply all 3 at one time. So you're going to have to multiply 2, get that solution, and then multiply this. Some of you do the table method. So if you do the table method, set it up as the table method. Some of you do x in the positive 6, x. Now be careful though, that's a negative 2. So if you do the table method, make sure you do the table method there. Now I like to do the FOIL, so I'm going to FOIL these two. You just have to multiply 2 of them first. So I'm going to have x squared minus 2x plus 6x minus 12. Don't forget this one here, but you can't do anything with it just yet. Then I like to go ahead and combine like terms. That's what's going to happen here when you combine like terms. So you're going to have x squared plus 4x minus 12 times x plus minus 1. Now, you have a trinomial times a binomial. You have 3 terms times 2 terms. You do a table, which is actually really nice for this, is you just set it up, you have 3 terms. And it doesn't matter if you have 3 terms going across this way, and 2 this way, or 3 down this way, or 2 that way. It doesn't matter. So x squared, 4x minus 12, watch your negatives, x and negative 1. Do this, your table method, or your 3 and the 2, and you'll do it. Or you could do your distributive property, which really that's what you're doing. You can do your distributive property for each of these. So I'm going to bring this way over here because it's going to need more room. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute this x to each of these terms. So that's going to be x cubed plus 4x squared minus 12x. Now you do the table, and I guarantee we'll meet at the same spot. Then I'm going to distribute the negative 1 to each term. So I'm going to have a negative x squared minus 4x plus 12. I'm going to go combine like terms. You're going to combine like terms when you do diagonal. Okay, when you do diagonally, they should have the same term if you do the table. So now I'm going to combine like terms. I'm going to keep my leading, or my highest coefficient, or highest exponent first. 4x squared minus x squared is a positive 3x squared. Negative 12x minus 4x is a negative 16x. And then I have positive 12. Just make sure I did that right. Okay, now, I'm not going to group up yet. I still have the 60 here. So I'm going to subtract 60 from the 12. That's the only one I can do it because it's same terms. So I'm going to do x, that might confuse you. X cubed plus 3x squared minus 16x. Now, 12 minus 60, it's like saying 60 minus 12, and that is going to be 48, and it's going to be a negative 48. That's going to equal 0. If you don't like the 0 here, then you can rewrite to put the 0 at the end. That's fine. Now I have 4 terms. There's nothing I can pull out of all 3 of these, or all 4 of them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to group. Now I'm going to group the first 2 together. That's a 3. And the first 2 together, if I said that, and the second 2 together. I'm going to go ahead and put my 0 at the end here. I think most of you are probably going to do that. Now I can pull out the GCF. So I can do it x squared. So I have an x plus 3. Now here, I want it to be x plus 3. So notice that's a negative 16 and negative 48. Well, 16 will go into 48 3 times. Okay? So I'm going to take out a negative 16, and I have an x plus 3. This is where you're going to x squared minus 16 and x plus 3. These 2 factor out to this one. Because that's what both terms have in common, x plus 3, so you're factoring that out. Now this can still be factored. You have x squared plus minus 16. This is a difference of perfect squares. You can do x minus 4, x plus 4. You have x plus 3. This is a difference of perfect squares. 16 is a perfect square, and x squared, there's a 1 here. And that's only a binomial, so that means it's x plus 4, and x minus 4. Now solve. X is going to equal 4, negative 4, or a negative 3. Well, we're talking about distance here. So if you had a negative 4 minus 1, that's a negative number. You can't have a negative distance. Negative 3, you can't have that. So the only answer that makes sense in this, if your x equals 4. Now be careful, though. You don't put 4 over here. So your height, I would say this is your height for sure. 4 minus 1 is 3. 4 minus 2, now this is where some people switch up the length and the width. I'm okay with that. 4 minus 2 is 2, so I would say maybe that is the length. And the width, 4 plus 6 is 10. I'm okay if you guys switch that around, because sometimes I do that too. The height, I know we all agree with that. Then what I do real quick and see, 2 times 3 is 6 times 10, that is 60. That does work out. Okay, there is your Rhino version. Oh gosh, I totally did not, sorry guys. So you could have a 10 and a 2 and a 3. Sorry, I didn't realize that wasn't on the screen.